What to do at the bottom of the quilt. Stay tuned. I'm Kristina Whitney, and
I'm Kim Sandberg.
And welcome to Watch and Learn. Today we're going to show you real quickly what to do when you get to the bottom of the quilt, how to take it off the leaders, things like that, just throwing some tips for you. So, Kim, we've got this beautiful quilt here.
Yes.
What do we do?
So we're at the bottom and we're ready to do that final basting. And you know, I'm so glad we're doing this because I feel like we're really good at showing how to get started.
Yes.
I don't know if we've ever actually done a video showing how to do the end. Maybe?
I know we have at least once. But it's not very common. So yeah, we need to teach people how to do this.
All right, so we need to finish with a basting down our sides and then across the bottom. And we've got 3 different ways we want to show you basting across the bottom to keep the quilt straight and square at the bottom.
So let me bring that machine over for you.
Yeah, so I'm going to show you the method that I usually use first. And what I like to do is I baste down and then I baste across the bottom, and I actually pull the pins out as I go. So I'll do maybe to about right here on this one.
Okay.
And I would actually baste all the way across and then baste up. So I'm essentially stitching a U. Okay, so I'm going to first adjust my machine down so I'm using a basting stitch, and I'll bring my bobbin up. All right, so I've switched to a basting stitch, and I'm just going to baste straight down the side here. And when I get to a point I want to stop at, I will stop and I'll make sure my needle is down.
Okay.
And then I'm going to pull out, I do 2 pins at a time. So if you want to grab the pin bowl for me, thank you. Okay. Now, be really mindful here. The corner, once again, you can see actually that if I line up that corner straight, I've got a little bit of extra fullness in there, don't I? So what I like to do is actually, because this corner is actually cut at a little bit of an angle. So I'm just going to smooth that out a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and come down. I'll go off the edge of the quilt, then go back to the side a little bit, and then I just start working my way across. Now, I leave the pins in like this because it just helps me keep the tension, and I'll get to about a point right there. I'll go ahead and stop. I'll pull out the next couple pins, and then I will just keep stitching across the bottom. So that is, I'll go ahead and stitch to about right there. That is one way to finish the bottom. What's another way, Kristina?
Well, we'll call that the Kim method.
Yes.
And I'm going to show you the Kristina method.
Yes.
So I do like to use pins. So what I do is I actually pin just above where I'm going to be stitching as I'm taking out these pins.
Okay.
And I space them pretty well.
And you're actually doing those before you do any stitching. You're just pulling that off, okay?
Yeah, so I'm not having to deal with the fabric and stuff shifting, but I'm also not dealing with the leader. So I'm going to bring this back down, and I would just continue stitching across. I find that that helps me keep the fabric in place and has a little bit of control.
I can see too where that could help you work in a little extra fullness because you can make sure and keep that fullness evenly spaced.
Yep. Okay, I'm going to put the needle down just to hold it in place there. Now the third way, oh, and then I take my pins out before I do any stitching.
Smart.
So the third way, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come up into my stitching space, and I'm going to do a straight line stitching across. So the same thing that I did with the pins earlier, but this is actually stitching, and I would do a large basting stitch and then remove all of the pins.
You know, I do use this method every once in a while, especially if I have a quilt that, say, has a wavy border at the bottom. But I will stitch it up a little further. I'll actually find maybe a row of a seam line, and I'll baste that seam line and keep it straight across, and then I can work in a little bit of that fullness at the bottom. I've had a couple of quilts I've had to do that on because there's been wavy borders on those suckers.
Yeah, and that's a great way to keep things straight using that piecing. So, okay, so after you do that baste, then you would come back and you would remove the pins, of course, but then stitch along within like less than 1/4 of an inch from the edge so that that is in your binding. And you'll have to remove that first basting stitch. Oops, got a little fullness there. I'm just trying to keep that as straight as I can, and then I'm going to come up the side and finish off that U. So each method has its pros and its cons.
Yep.
We all pick what works for us, and I'm sure that there's other methods out there that people use. So again, just the goal is to have a nice straight line, to have it attached so that the whole sandwich is now released from this pole here.
The top pole.
Yep.
Okay, so here's a question for you.
Yes.
At this point, do you ever trim the batting?
Actually, now that you mention that, yes, I do sometimes, because if I've got excess, like a lot that's hanging down, it might get in my way. So yeah, sometimes I'll go by and I'll trim off the batting. If I were completely done with the quilt at this point, I could even just trim this bottom line nice and straight and then unpin the excess backing. So lots of different ways to do that. Now, let's say I'm not done with the entire quilt.
Right, you've just first pass.
Yes. So a lot of times when we're doing the quilting, we'll do the bones, or we'll do all of one thread color.
Right.
But then we want to be able to go back. So what we would do is remove our side clamps. And if you have the Gallery 2, Gallery
2, Studio 2, Studio 3.
You can lift the side arms and drop it down into clear view.
And I correct that in Studio 3. Actually, you can drop it down. Just remember, it's a little bit of a different. You have to undo that knob first.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I'm going to just pop this pole out. And a lot of times I'll just set it down on the floor because I'm done with that pole at this point. But I need to take this other pole, pop it out, and put it into that top position. Then I'll use my opposite ratchet, and I can tighten that up. So now I'm in clear view. I don't have that other pole in the way, and I can do what we call the double Dutch.
Right.
Where I can roll back and forth as much as I want to.
Within that quilt.
It's only on those two, oops, that ratchet went down. Only on the two different poles, so I can go back to the beginning of the quilt and say, oh, I want to add some fills here.
Exactly.
Or, oh, I'm going to use a different color here. But I have that option to roll back and forth.
This is a great idea too if you wanted to put your binding on at this point.
Yes.
That way you can easily advance the quilt back and forth as you get that binding put on there.
Perfect example.
Yep.
Yep, so that's what we can do at the end of the quilt.
Exactly.
So quick, short, to the point. Thank you for joining us. Make sure that you like and subscribe, and stay tuned for some of those Instagram photos, and have fun quilting.